Capital is a big deal, but if you're spending your capital on high energy costs, you're spending all this time and energy trying to get capital only to turn it over to an energy provider, which may or may not be making money themselves. So we're going to talk about the cost of energy. We're going to talk about renewable energy as one approach. Obviously, there are many approaches to reducing energy costs, but renewables is one we're focused on for this forum. In 2014, the African Energy Outlook estimates that fewer than a quarter of Somalis have access to electricity. For those with access, tariffs are among the highest in the world, varying from 80 cents to $1.50 per kilowatt hour, while their neighbors living in Ethiopia and Kenya pay less than 20 cents. That's the graphic we put together, and that's why I had it up earlier. We have reports out here that anyone can take. One of them is on renewable energy, and it's basically called Powering Progress, the opportunity for renewable energy, and the other one is on business associations. So a little plug, they're free reports that we put together from Shuraako, from our foundation, the Wonder of Future Foundation. But you can see that with 128 per capita GDP in Somalia at 80 cents to $1.50 per kilowatt hour versus 454 per capita GDP and 6 cents in Ethiopia, 942 per capita and 15 cents here. The playing field is not the same. And that's something that we've got to address and change. Municipal grids were destroyed during the Civil War or fell into disrepair. Private electricity providers set up generation and distribution grids. However, many providers lack technical training and operate highly inefficient systems, often using refurbished diesel generators, leading to substantial losses. You can see the comparison of losses in generation there versus in other contexts is very, very high. And so we all know there's got to be investment in this infrastructure. The Somaliland government estimates that more than 100,000 liters of high-polluting diesel fuel is burned daily in Somaliland alone. The cost of fuel eats up around 60 to 65% of power providers' revenues, making it difficult to sustain a profit or to invest in more efficient energy systems. The situation is worsened with the rising price of diesel, which has quadrupled since 2002. Economic constraints. The high cost of electricity devours most business margins and makes it hard for local goods to compete with imports. There's damage to the environment. It strains on the effective service provision, so the inefficiency. I'm going to go ahead and cut this short because I think we need to get into the panel, but I'll let them bring out these points later. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation here with various experts in the sector. I'll go through and read their bios one by one, and then we'll have a discussion. Our first panelist is Alastair Miller, Renewable Energy Specialist, IFC Ethiopia. Alastair is Renewable Energy Specialist with the International Finance Corporation. He has broad experience in a range of renewable energy technologies, both grid-connected and off-grid, in developing countries including Pakistan, India, Egypt, and Ethiopia. He is currently leading a program to develop the market for off-grid solar products in Ethiopia, as well as supporting a number of other energy initiatives elsewhere. He has a master's degree in mechanical engineering and energy systems from the University of Manchester. Anders Pedersen, energy specialist, is an energy specialist with the World Bank Group who has extensive experience in Africa. He is an economist with experience in management consulting, banking, public sector administration, including the World Bank, United Nations, and bilateral development aid organizations, and Global Trade Association. Anders received a master's in economics. I'm sorry. Okay. Did we not? I don't
know what's going on. There's like a confusion in the program.
Okay, I think we want you on this panel.
Okay.
Welcome. That may have been a mistake. We have two panels going. We have one here up front, and then we have another one later. And actually, Anders, no, you told me about this. So anyway, well, thank you for joining the panel. Okay. We got him up here. That was not expected. Anders is going to be moderating the next panel, the breakout session. We're going to have a breakout session where those that are going to be talking about renewable energy can go into more detail. He's moderating the next one as well. So Anders received his master's in economics and business administration from Copenhagen Business School. Mohammed Ege is a board member of the wind turbine specialist Alog Energy and a power production company established in Borama, Somaliland in 2004. Saeed Ali Abdi is the general manager of Golis Energy Company, a national leader in clean energy services, was established in Hargeisa in 2004, and has been providing solar power to households and commercial entities in Somaliland for over 10 years. Prior to his working with Golis, consultant for World Food Program, DRC, coffee, solar installations, and various other entities, government and civil society organizations. Anders Hansch, investment director and partner, Frontier Investment Management. Prior to co-founding Frontier Investment Management, Anders worked 2 years for a technology startup, 2 years leading an internet startup, and 10 years assisting Danish companies with business development in emerging markets as consultant and partner in a consultancy firm under the Confederation of Danish Industries. He holds a Master's of International Business from Copenhagen Business School. Abdirahman Abdullahi, is that your, Abdirahman, yeah, there it is. Yeah, Abdirahman is a PhD candidate in the Department of Electrical Power Engineering at University Teknologi in Malaysia. Not bad. He is the author of the feasibility study of renewable energy based microgrid system in Somaliland's urban centers. Okay, thank you to the panelists. Okay, so first question to the panel. For Alastair and Anders, could you describe the support role IFC provides to governments and other stakeholders on renewable energy? Alastair.
Certainly. Is the microphone on? Can I be heard?
I'm not sure if it's on or not. Is it on?
About that. I think it's good.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, first of all. And the first point to stress about the IFC, as Manuel has already mentioned, is that it is the part of the World Bank group that is focused on the private sector. So if I could turn your question around, instead of starting with what we provide for governments, but instead start with our main clients, which is the private sector, and then touch on the government part. Okay.
Yeah, maybe hold the mic.
Please do shout if it drops off again.
Thank you.
Or I'll just shout myself. So in terms of what we provide to the private sector, as the name suggests, our core role is indeed finance. So our day-to-day, our bread and butter activities are financing private sector projects and companies in developing countries. Power has always been a major part of what we do. And in recent years, given the trends in the sort of power market worldwide and the trends in renewable energy that have already been mentioned, renewables have become truly the dominant part of our investment activities in power, which is quite an impressive achievement, I would say, for an organization like ours. It's fair to say that we are one of, if not the leading lender to renewable energy projects in the developing world. And we provide a full range of sort of debt and equity instruments, much as you would see from a commercial bank. In fact, it's generally worth thinking of IFC as something pretty similar to a commercial bank. Don't come to us if you're expecting sort of cheap money, expecting grants, these sorts of things. That is really not what the IFC does. It does have other benefits that make it very important in the field we work in. So we can sometimes offer longer tenors, and of course we are willing to consider project companies, we're willing to face risks that most commercial investors will not face. And in fact, that sort of links on to one of the key benefits that the IFC brings. In addition to the financing on its own account, one of the real pluses of working with the IFC is the fact that it can unlock other sources of finance. So IFC is very well known for being very rigorous when it comes to analyzing investments on the due diligence side, whether that's technical, legal, and so forth. This, of course, can make it not the easiest or quickest partner to work with up front. We've got to be honest about that. But if a project or a company gets through that process, it's a very clear indication of the quality of what we're talking about. So if IFC commits to invest in your project, this stands as a sort of badge of quality or a seal of approval that can unlock many other sources of finance. And that's a key part of what we do. In addition to the financing side of things, we do provide we run a full program of advisory activities. for a range of different stakeholders, starting with the private sector, but also the public sector, various government agencies as well. So a quick example on the private sector side, if, for example, we invest in a power sector utility, then one sort of thing we have done in a few countries is I'm working on the advisory side with that utility to increase their efficiency, to try and bring them towards sort of international best practice. So we've already heard about technical losses in power systems in Somalia. Working on reducing transmission and distribution losses is one of the sort of things that we can do. Looking at the public sector side, this can also take a sort of wide range of forms. We advise at sort of high level in terms of strategy for governments wanting to get the private sector more involved in their economies. So for example, this can be sort of economy-wide, or it can be looking at specific sectors. So an energy example would be working with, we're currently working with the government of Ethiopia on a strategy to support private sector participation in the geothermal sector there. And then looking at the more sort of detailed part, we have a very strong PPP team that can advise governments on, well, acts as a transaction advisor on PPP transactions. Now they work on a wide range of sectors, but power very definitely does feature, and renewables increasingly so. I think that roughly wraps it up, and I hope it answers your question.
Very good, thank you. Anders Pedersen, do you have anything to add to this?
Does this work?
I think it's working.
Okay, good. Well, I think just a few words on the overall World Bank Group setup. So the IFC is our private sector arm. We call them our sister. And the World Bank Group, or the World Bank where I sit, is the side that deals more with governments. Maybe it's a good idea to give you an idea of how we, for instance, work in the power sector in Kenya. Typically in a place like Kenya, the IFC would support the generation side and the more profitable sides of development in the energy sector. And the World Bank Group would go in with much cheaper loans, much longer tenant loans, but these loans would be directed towards things like transmission and connections for the poor and so on. So we try to divide the workload between ourselves, that the World Bank Group side will go to the, for lack of a better word, the not profitable sides, and the IFC will target the more profitable sides of the industry. That's sort of a rough way of explaining how we work. And that hopefully will also be a model that we will employ in Somalia. So the World Bank Group will be working more with the government side and more with the sort of things that you cannot necessarily expect the private sector to pay for on its own. Maybe I should stop there.
Thank you. We're going to have a breakout session, like I said, a little later. We'll go into more detail. The panels will shift a little bit. So for those of you who want to have more of an interactive experience, then we'd invite you to join that panel. Thank you for making that distinction. Let me turn a little bit to break this up a little bit. Let's talk to Abdirahman. Maybe you could speak to the description of the scientific feasibility study. And you know, I think it's pretty well understood that if you're going to make a recommendation, or if an IFC or a World Bank's going to get involved, they have to have certain data they can go on. So tell us how your study fits with that. Tell us about your study.
Thank you very much for as you can see, there's a lot of big guys around here, so I'll try to give the feasibility study point of view. So I think the biggest problem with according to my study, the biggest problem with the energy sector right now is lack of data. There's no data, there's not much data available to trust on. So we tried to find as much data as we can from various sectors. I have visited many utility operators, many of them I have seen them here. I really thank them for providing me the opportunity to talk to them and know deeper on how they operate and what are their scenarios. So based on our assessment, I believe, and as well as I contributed to the report on Shuraako, if you read in detail, everyone has one, if you read in detail, there's a great potential of renewable energy in the whole Somali region, great potential. And if you go through the assessment on the renewable energy assessments in detail, you will really get shocked on the how much energy is out there to be invested. But the biggest problem, I think, in my point of view, is lack of cooperation from various different stakeholders, including the various energy operators, as well as the government side and all the other stakeholders. So what I think is the best way is for Somalis to tap on the various investors out there, the World Bank or IFC or other institutions. The best way is to go together, to collaborate together. If you are, let's say, energy, an IPP, or for example, several IPP in a particular town, they should be operating together so that they can get the investments they require on different sides. And besides that, there is no distinction between the various energy sectors. For example, like just now, one of our panelists has mentioned that they really want to invest in generation side. For the Somali scenario, there is no one called in generation side or distribution side or transmission side. Everyone is everything. So to me, I think if the work is done in a more collaborative way, these kind of sides can come up. You can see the prospect of an off-grid hybrid system, but that to me is a short-term solution. It's not a long-term solution. And for a long-term purpose, we need further studies, we need more scientific work, we need more data, and then more collaboration from different sectors.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're gonna come back to you in a second because what you're talking about is really important. We've seen this from the Shuraako perspective on a small scale. We don't look at it on a large scale, but when I've been out working with business, every time cost of energy is a constraint. And every time, not every time, but most of the time, they look at some kind of renewable approach. But we look at smaller investments. Anders Hunch is here from Frontier Investment. Anders, could you speak to a little bit of what Frontier does, what's your approach in the renewable energy investment, kind of what you're doing in the region, and also why, what do you need? What does a group need to come to you to engage investments? So you hear someone talking about this from the scientific standpoint, you hear IFC speaking. Where do you fit into this continuum?
Thank you. Well, I represent an investment fund based in Denmark, and we have $70 million in capital from institutional investors to invest in greenfield renewable energy in Africa. We are mainly focused in East Africa, have an office in Nairobi. We also invest in the development of projects, so from the very early stage development through to construction and operation. We also take a very active role in the process when we invest, so we go in together with the original developer and we become a co-developer, help to close a project and get the financing in place. We provide the equity and we help secure debt financing from IFC or commercial banks or the likes. And we have a long-term ownership horizon on projects. We invest in projects of size between $10 million up to $300 million. We also do smaller projects, which might be more relevant in Somaliland, and then it's bundled, so it's altogether is in the size of about $10 million. We are so far invested in about 8 projects here in East Africa. We have a large geothermal investment here in Kenya. We have quite a few small hydropower projects in Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania, between from 5 megawatt up to 80 is the largest we are working on. Now, in terms of what we require, if we were to invest in Somaliland in renewable energy in the private sector, there has to be, first of all, a regulatory framework in place that allows private investors to own and operate. I guess it says itself. The other thing is a off-taker with whom we can have a long-term power purchase agreement, and long-term is typically around 20 years. It can either be utilities, private or public utilities, or large businesses that has a high energy demand that we can sell to directly. Now, the key to making renewable energy affordable and competitive with thermal, with diesel power plants, etc., is long-term financing at low interest rates. These projects are typically financed with about 70% debt and 30% equity. So it makes a very big difference whether the debt has to be repaid in 6 years or whether it's repaid in 15 plus years. The kind of projects we work with, where we get the cost of electricity down to being competitive, we're talking about debt financing with a repayment of around 15 years. Interest rates between 6 and $6 to 8% in dollar terms. And all the power purchase agreements are usually made in dollars. So it's paid in local currency, but it's based on the dollar tariff. Now, in order to get such long-term financing in place, both on the debt side and equity from investors like us, there are sort of two basic things that are required. One is a guarantee against payment default. We cannot finance this and get any lenders to provide capital for such projects if we are not secured against the utility or the business stop paying for power after a couple of years. We'll lose a lot of money. Now, those guarantees are usually organized with a government guarantee in one way or the other, and we'll get into that in the next session maybe for details, which can then be insured with groups like the World Bank or other institutions. US government have OPIC that also give insurances, etc. And the other thing is a very natural thing also, but I'm not sure how it is in Somaliland, but that's sort of the traditional foreign investment guarantees against expropriation, movement of capital, etc. So that's sort of the basic things that needs to be in place for us to look at a project at all in a country. Now, there's project-specific things, but maybe next session we can get into.
Next session. No, I appreciate your helping us with that. And just so you know, there are a lot of energy companies here. We put together a panel across the group so we could speak through a continuum, because part of what we wanted to do here was put it all together in one place. I mean, quite frankly, it would do well to have a specific forum just for renewables, probably in the region. But anyway, we can go into that next. That's why we'll do the next breakout session into more details. Let us take it to now to local providers. So we've talked about how IFC comes in, how they interface, World Bank, and how other outside investment funds could come in, some scientific data that needs to bolster that. Now let's talk about who's actually doing it on the ground. Mohammed, you have an energy company there in Borma, and you've got a project underway. You want to tell us a little bit about that project? And you know, I think it's important to understand both why it's exciting and also what some of the challenges have been. You've been breaking some ground on this. So tell us a little bit about your project.
You know, I'm thank you for information you've given me, and I'm not used to it to talk in front of a lot of people like you. If I made a mistake, please, I'm sorry for that.
These are your friends.
Anyway, I prefer to speak Somali if you,
it's okay.
You guys don't mind it? Okay.
It's fine with me. Somebody.
waxaan leerka siinaa magaalada Boorama Renewable Energy waxaan bilownay 2011 waxaana nagu kalifanay waxay hay'adda shidaalka wadankeena oo aad u qaaliya ayaa rabnaa dadkan inaan u dhibireyno insha Allah ilaahayna nala garab yare qiimo jaban inaan kaga iibino anaguna waxaan horumar gaarno marka imikadan laftigeeda waxaan ka imiday
Let him translate.
Yeah. Mohammed is from Borama. He owns a Alok company. I missed some of the information he said, but and he's the technical management of that company. So he's the largest company in Borama, and they just introduced it renewable.
waxaan imikadan ka imiday Ethiopia oo doonaynay ilaa waxaan soo iibinay 4 machine oo waaweyn oo kuwan hawada oo midkiiba yahay 450 kilowatt waxaan ku rakibno haday tahay wiish iyo haday tahay technical expertise wadankeena waxa ma jiraan
Okay, good.
marka waa inaad jarmalka ama diida laga keeno marka waxaan idin intaan diida qaaliga tagi lahayn kuwa walaalaheena jaban aan ka soo qaadano
He just came back from Ethiopia before he came here, and they purchased 4 wind turbines. Each one is 450 kilowatt. And he said instead of going to Germany to get technical assistance, we went to Ethiopia to get cheaper and neighbor and skills. But you purchased from Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
waxaan ka soo iibsanay Jarmalka.
Yeah, but they purchased from Germany two wind turbines. Each one is 450 kilowatt from Siemens, refurbished wind turbines.
Ah, marka waxa imika ay yaaleen xeradaydan power stationka mid oo 8 bilood oo sugayno waan ladin keena qodob weel baankuna waxa ahayn qoladani iyaga waxba ka sheegi maayo lacagta gelisay laakiin intii technical support hadana wali jeebkay adigu si kale u martay adigu
Okay. And actually, these two wind turbines was funded by World Bank, as implemented by the Somali Business Fund (SBF). There were some technical issues. You don't want to go in detail. Maybe he will talk later on with the World Bank. So, and actually, they have the wind turbines now on the ground, but they are not working because of technical issue. So that's why I went to Ethiopia to bring technical expertise. And I visit the site. So actually, they put it there, but there are some technical problems. So they need that technical assistance. Yeah.
And waxaan also aan ku jiraa mashruuc imika ay Ethiopia ku fulinayaan ayesha oo ah ka soo saari doonaan ilaa 350 adu 120 xabadood oo wind turbine midkiiba soo saarayo 3 megawatt ay ku rakibayaan waxaynu ugu talagaleen energy-ga in laga iibiyo whole Somalia, Djibouti, Kenya ilaa iyo Rwanda marka rageenani imika ku jira rag badan saxaabada halka way fadhiyaan leerka Hargeysa boormiye ka shida kulley waxaan u soo socdaa
No so gab. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, actually he said
marka wara ka tashado
he gave advice to his partners and his colleagues from the power companies. He said now Ethiopia, they are actually implementing a big project in Hawash. So it's around how many megawatt? 300?
each 120 xabo mid diba
120 turbines. Each one is how many megawatt?
3 megawatt.
3 megawatt. So he said, and the future, their plan is to sell this energy to Somalia and to Djibouti. So he said, and there is a competition coming for you, for the local companies, if you don't act together and if you don't come together and compete that price. Go ahead. That's it. Good.
Ka baxay
Yes, it's done. Yeah.
I know there's more that can be said. And I'll tell you what's great about this project is an entrepreneur doesn't stop. Just because there's a technical issue doesn't mean that's the end of the deal. So this is, we knew when they were coming onto this panel that they faced some issues, but that's the reality of the situation. That's why we want to talk about it. Okay, Golis. So we've heard from you, Saeed, and let's see, where am I getting my questions? Can you tell us a little bit about, okay, let's talk about the state of technical expertise. Some of the areas that were brought to me when I talked to Anders about, okay, how do we get some support for renewables throughout the region, et cetera? He said, well, we got to see scientific feasibility. We've got to see plans that are executable. We've got to see the technical ability here for technicians to maintain it. Speak to us a little bit about the technical abilities that are there, technicians, what is happening in the sector to train. If you start putting up all these solar panels and these home systems, they've got to be maintained. Speak to us a little bit about what's going on, at least as far as your experience.
Thank you very much, Lee, and I'm very happy to be part of this team today. And if I speak about a little bit what we do and our technical capacity, we do assessment, designing, and supply and installation, maintenance, and training of the end users for solar systems and wind generators. For solar systems, we can capable to do to install megawatts, but wind generators, although we have the technical, but we don't have the equipment like the cranes which can be installed and to erect the turbines. Now the cranes which is available to erect wind turbines is up to 100 kilowatt. So this 400 kilowatt there's no crane available which can erect. So that's the areas. For the IPPs, recently we are doing solar installations and wind generator installations for independent power producers, which we are urging them to switch to solar installations. We are opening a center, Renewable Energy Service Center in Hargeisa, and it's under process now, whereby we are buying the machines, hydraulic bending machines, to enable IBBs to get the facility where they can repair their wind generators. But still, we need upgrading of our technical expertise team. As I mentioned yesterday, we have 3 engineers and 17 technicians, but still something is missing in terms of regulation, in terms of equipment which will be used to implement the large scale of renewable energy systems. But at the moment, we are capable to install all small and medium-sized renewable energy.
What about training programs for new technicians? What's happening about training? Are there training programs? Are you developing new technicians?
Actually, our plan is that we produce for the last 2 years and 20 technicians each year, but still those who are training still need TOT to be upgraded.
Yeah.
So I can say still the technical need of the country is not enough at the moment.
Yeah. So these are deeper issues that we'll get into in the breakout session. So what we want to do is pique your interest. And the reason we want to talk about this is because the theme is all of you have a stake in the cost of energy, because all of you pay the expense of the cost of energy. And in other economies, it's different. And so to be competitive, there's got to be a change. I hate to cut it short, but we are running a little bit long. So I want to thank the panel. And Anders, by the way, I had your bio together with the other ones to introduce you in the other ones, so I read it. And now I pulled him onto the panel. He didn't know he was coming up here, so I apologize. But he did great. So I want to thank them for their participation. Each of you, this is a networking event. Pull them aside, have a conversation with them. Get into your breakout session, discuss the issues. We're trying to bring together the actors so you can make these connections for just this reason. So thank you, and then I have one more announcement before we go. Let me thank the panelists. This is a gift from us. Thank you. There we go. Thank you. Anders, you get yours next. Okay. Thank you, everybody.